Hey there, everybody. What's going on? This is Read, Right, and Wrong, the author chat show at City Limits Publishing, where we discuss everything we've read, what we're writing, and what's wrong with it all. I'm your host, Peter Fenton, and today we are talking all things middle grade, young adult historical fiction with Cheryl King, whose new book, Sitting on Top of the World, releases on June 15th. Cheryl, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you. Cheryl and I have been interacting on Twitter for quite a bit of time at this point. So it's nice to finally put a face and a voice to the name.
Yes.
Yeah. So, my favorite first question to get us started, tell us a little bit about yourself, Cheryl.
Okay, so for this, I'm going to give you three truths and a lie,
Okay.
and you figure out which one is the lie.
Awesome. I love games.
Okay, number one, I live in a log home in Mansfield, Texas.
Okay.
Number two, I am now on my fourth career. Number three, I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. And number four, I have two teenage sons.
Okay. I think the Suns one is true.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
They are 17 and 13, and they are pretty awesome.
Uh huh. Hmm. I think you live in Texas.
Yes, I do. That one is a truth.
That one's the truth. Okay. I wasn't sure if you were trying to throw me off by throwing in the log
The log
cabin.
home. Yeah,
But so you live in a log home?
I do. We kind of lucked out on finding this house while we were looking at a different one down the road, and we loved it. It's kind of secluded and in the woods, so yeah.
Very nice. All right. So that leaves me with a 50-50 chance. And I'm going to say J.K. Rowling is a controversial figure. So I'm going to say that one's the lie.
Oh, okay. Well, so here's my first piece of evidence.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I definitely am a Harry Potter fan because actually, the
Yeah,
very
that's
first
fine.
Harry Potter book, I forget when it came out, like 2001 or something.
I
It was quite a
think
while
they were
ago.
coming out in the mid 90s to
Oh,
start.
okay.
Yeah. But that's fine.
But anyway,
Around
when I
that time.
first read that one, that was the book that really inspired me to start writing for kids.
Cool.
So the lie is actually I'm on my, did I say fourth? My
You
fourth
said
career.
four.
I'm actually only on my second career.
Okay.
My first one was journalism. That's what my undergraduate degree is in. And I did copy editing and page design at the Corpus Christi Caller Times.
Yeah.
Love Corpus Christi. And then I did page design at the Fort Worth Star Telegram. And so my second career is education. I started out teaching language arts to middle schoolers, loved that. But then it evolved a little bit. I got my master's degree in literacy
Mm-hmm.
and, well, curriculum and instruction with a focus on literacy. And now I'm finishing up a 2-year dyslexia therapist training program with the Scottish Rite Hospital for Children.
Interesting.
So
How did you get into dyslexia therapy?
So that too, I'm a big believer in everything just kind of happens for a reason because I don't know, I was having a rough year a couple years ago and kind of um trying to figure out some things in my life. And then my principal came to me and asked, would you be interested in doing this training program for dyslexia therapy? And it's a highly renowned program.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when I did my master's degree, we had one portion of one class covered dyslexia, and I really wanted to learn more about it. So I said, okay, and here I am.
Great. That's really cool. I want to cycle back to the pillow that you showed us. So for the
Yes.
listener at home, when we were talking about Harry Potter, Cheryl held up a platform 9 3/4
Oh, yes.
pillow that has glitter
But if I do this, now it's his glasses.
Oh, yeah. So now it's the glasses and the scar. That's really cool. Was
It's
that
one of
from...
those sequin pillows, and
Yeah.
the kids love these.
Yeah. The did you get that at like the Harry Potter world?
No, I have
No.
never been. I really want to.
Yeah.
But my brother gave this to me. My brother and his wife gave this to me for Christmas, and they went to Harry Potter World.
Uh-huh.
I have not gotten to go because when my kids were little, we went to Disney World
Mm-hmm.
instead, and because I thought they were because my youngest was like 3 years old at that time, so he would have been a little bit too young for the Harry Potter World.
Sure.
But now, yeah, I'd
Yeah.
really like to go.
I mean, they're really great books.
Yeah.
Let's move into our first segment then, since we're talking
Okay.
about Harry Potter and books that we like, recent readings. So, Cheryl, you teach at the middle grade and you've written a middle grade book. What do you like to read?
So I go back and forth between young adult stuff. Um, I really like reading young adult, especially dystopian.
Mm-hmm.
But every once in a while that gets a little bit old, I guess, and you just want
Bleak.
to read some really, really adult. Okay, I didn't mean it that way. I
No.
didn't mean like triple X, but just rich adult writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm reading right now is All the Light We Cannot See
Yeah.
by Anthony Doerr, and I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. Maybe
That
it's
is a
French.
strangely spelled name. Doerr.
Maybe it's Doerr with a
Doer.
with a French accent. But I was hoping to be finished with this by now, but it's not a light read.
No.
It's pretty heavy.
So what's the story with that one?
So this takes place during the German occupation of France,
Mm-hmm.
and so or the Nazi occupation of France,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just very heavy, and it goes back and forth between two. It's like a dual timeline story, kind of,
Oh,
because it
okay.
goes back and forth between a German character and a French character. And the French character, by the way, is a young girl who is blind, and it's super interesting. It reminds me of, oh my gosh, it's a middle grade book called Thunderstruck,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm blanking on the author right now. I should have prepared for this.
Well, that's fun.
Because in Thunderstruck, the main character is deaf. And the way the author wrote it is so immersive into that world. And like you
Hmm.
really kind of feel that silence as you're reading.
Yes.
And this one is kind of the same, but with the sense of sight. As I'm reading this, I can just feel all the other senses heightened the way the author writes it. It's really great. It's just
That
taking
sounds
me
really...
forever to get through.
Yeah. And that definitely is heavy subject matter, Nazi
Yeah,
occupation, for
definitely.
sure. Cool. So what do you like to bring into your classroom and have your students read?
Okay, so it's been a while since I've been able to do that. Number one,
Well,
because
of
of
course.
COVID.
Right.
But number two, because the dyslexia therapy curriculum that I'm using is very structured and
Sure.
very tight, and there's not extra time. This sounds sad for me to say it out loud. There's not extra time for pleasure reading.
Mm-hmm.
But when I taught language arts and when I taught reading improvement, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
um, oh man, I loved building up my classroom library and um, and you know what I love to do is book talks.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just open up a book and read like the first chapter, or if it's a long first chapter, just the first chunk, and then tell the kids a little bit about it, get them excited about reading. But some of so most recently I taught 8th grade, and they're a little bit older, so
Mm-hmm.
books like Neil Schusterman Unwind,
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah.
that series was pretty compelling, kind of creepy compelling. Um,
Super creepy. I remember reading
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. Um, let's see, trying to think of others, and just I wish I had it like right next to me. That book that I told you about, Thunderstruck.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about that one is that it's two stories in one. One story is told in prose, the other story is told just in illustrations, and the
Oh.
illustrations are amazing, and those stories are interwoven throughout the
Mm-hmm.
book. And that book is like, I don't know, like thick. It's like
Yeah.
two books in one.
Wow.
And so that's the kind of book you would think middle schoolers would avoid like the plague,
Right.
because it's so thick. They go, I'm not reading that.
Mm-hmm.
But when I book talked it to them and showed them those illustrations, I had, like a line of kids signed up to
Yeah.
be who's going to be next to take this book. And then anyway, those two stories converge at the
Mm-hmm.
end, and you find out how they're connected, and it's fabulous. Gosh, what is the author's name? Sorry, I need it. Hey Siri, who wrote Thunderstruck?
Which one? Here
Oh,
are some options.
oh my gosh.
Thunderstruck.
Oh, sorry, it's Wonderstruck. No wonder. It's Wonderstruck by Brian Selznick.
Technology. It's fascinating. What about, so we've talked about some of the bigger names, and of course we talked about Harry Potter. What about some underrated books or authors? Like, are there any books that you know of that nobody else has read?
There's one that I picked up, and I can't remember how I came across this one, but it's called The Last Astronaut by David Wellington.
Oh, that is a cool cover.
And so I'm normally not a sci-fi kind of person,
Mm-hmm.
but I was surprised at how much I got into this book.
Yeah.
So it's these astronauts on a mission, and um, it's when they get to the solar system, um, and the planet or whatever that they find, that's where it gets super intense and suspenseful. And I mean, like, honestly, I don't read sci-fi, but I really, really enjoyed this one.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds like a good book.
What I like about a lot of books for younger readers is that they're enjoyable to adults as well. It's,
Mm-hmm.
you can't pigeonhole them into a single age group, because they're fabulous for all ages, which is what I hope happens with Sitting on Top of the World.
Yeah. So why don't we transition into our next segment, Writing Away? So you have a book that is releasing on June 15th, Sitting on
Yes.
Top of the World. So tell us about it.
Yes. Okay. So it is young adult historical fiction. It's set during the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And my main character, June, she's pretty awesome. And what I hope readers do is I just hope they kind of fall in love with June and think of her as a friend. And anyway, so she kind of feels the weight of the world on her shoulders when things start going from bad to worse.
Mm-hmm.
And she wants to help her family, so she ends up train hopping with hobos. And as a young girl, that could be pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
So um I don't know, I don't want to say too much,
Sure.
but
So let's talk about June. So she
okay.
is how old?
So when she hops train, she's 14,
Mm-hmm.
almost 15. But the story kind of flashes back to the beginning. She starts telling how things start to change for her family
Mm-hmm.
because of the depression. And so for a large chunk of the book, she's like 12, 13.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And so where did the inspiration for her come from?
So Years ago, when I had just got my master's degree, the role I served for my school district at the time was kind of like a literacy coach, and part of my job was to write with a team, write the district assessments.
Hmm.
And I came across a story about train hoppers during the Great Depression, and it fascinated me. I thought
Yeah.
it was so cool. I wanted to learn more about that. And so then, kind of fast forward to more recently, I was doing some flash fiction writing competitions,
Hmm.
and it's with New York NYC Midnight. And when they, sorry, I'm trying to think of the best way to tell this. So for the competition, they give you prompts. They give you a genre, a location, and an action that has to happen in your story.
Hmm.
And so as I was waiting for the day when I would get my prompts, I was thinking, okay, which genre would be the hardest for me to write for this? And I fell on historical fiction.
Right.
So I started playing in my mind, okay, what would I write if I get that as a genre? And then I remembered that story about the train hoppers and how cool that would be. And then I started thinking, okay, what if it was a girl, a
Yeah.
young girl hopping on? I mean, because this was back in the 30s, so um, that might not have been that common. Of course, I did some research and found out more about that. But anyway,
Hmm.
I never got historical fiction as a genre for the competition. But that story of a young girl, feeling desperate enough to have to go riding the rails during the Great Depression kind of appealed to me. So I just started writing this story in my head, and it was expanding and expanding, and there 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 it came.
Yeah. So without going into the spoilers of your book, tell me a little bit more about train hopping. So it sounds like, because I don't have a frame of reference for this. What is Great Depression train hopping?
So they call them hobos or
Hmm.
tramps. And these are people who either they have fallen on hard times. They've either lost their livelihoods, they've lost their home, or both. And like during the Great Depression, um, you know, businesses were closing down, shops were closing down. There wasn't work to be had, and
Hmm.
so if you live in it, you live in this small area, and there's no work around you. You've got to find something somewhere, and so people would just hop on freight trains, open
Hmm.
train cars, and go for a ride. And one of the things I found kind of fascinating about that is that it became just this culture, this hobo culture, where some people claimed, that they just loved that. It was
Hmm.
the thrill of this kind of freewheeling life, where you don't have a place where you have to be at a certain time. And um and then, there was the risk behind it, the danger behind it. I read a lot about pretty gruesome injuries that
Hmm.
could happen, and that did happen.
Yeah.
And then there were people who supported the train hoppers, like farms, that there would be some kind of signal, whether they had some kind of symbol painted um, on their fence, or there was some way that they would signal to hobos that they were friendly, and you could stop by for a
Hmm.
meal, or you could stop by them, to see, and they would pay you for a day's work or something. And then there were the people who were not supportive of hobos, and these were the
Hmm.
railroad bulls. And I read that they were employed by the train companies or the railroads, and they would rough up, they would find people, who had hopped on a train, and they would throw them off, beat them up, or just arrest them, take them to jail. But it could get pretty rough.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Yeah.
So So do you see echoes of these events happening throughout the book? Like, you drew on this research, of course, when you plotted the book out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, of course I took some creative liberties. There's of course some details that, I'm not positive it would happen exactly that way,
Mhm.
but, um,
We're all writers. We do that.
yeah.
Yeah. And so then the thought of throwing in a girl from the Depression era. Where is the book set?
Maynardville, Tennessee.
Okay. Yeah.
And I planned to visit because I've been to Tennessee before, but not necessarily Maynardville, Tennessee. But I
Mhm.
wanted to go visit where my story was set. And then COVID happened, and
Right.
things were just weird as far as being able to travel, and
Mhm.
so I haven't gotten to go.
That's okay.
Yeah, small, very teeny tiny town. And June's family lives on a farm, a small family farm.
Mhm.
Her travels take her up into Virginia for a little bit, but it's mostly in Maynardville, Tennessee.
Very nice. And where in the state is that? Is that closer to the Carolina side or the Missouri side?
Whichever side is east.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Carolina.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, the Carolinas.
Yeah. Very nice. So what was the timeline like for writing this book? So when did you start? How quickly did it take?
Okay, so I was kind of writing it in my head
Hmm.
for some months, and then as soon as the school year ended last May, um, I started typing it, and I was finished end of June, maybe.
Okay.
Um,
Very fitting.
yeah, and I, you know, of course, as so having a copy editor background and being kind of like an eagle eye for, like, I can't, some people just type it all up real fast and
Hmm.
then they go back through and edit. Well, I cannot, if I make a mistake as I'm typing, I'm not leaving it for later. I'm going to
Right.
fix it right then, right? So
Sure.
I'm editing and revising as I go. And then each time I finished a chapter, I would shoot a chapter off to my mom,
Hmm.
print it out, make my kids and my husband read it. And then I also had a critique partner, um, that I had. There's a group of it has grown, but there's a group of us that grew out of the NYC midnight writing competitions, and so I had some critique partners through that group who looked at early drafts as well. But
Hmm.
really, by mid-July, I believe it was, is when I felt done enough to say, hey, let's get this published now.
Yeah.
So I
And
started
so,
querying.
yeah. So querying,
um,
tell me a little bit about that. What was that process like?
so part of that I was going to get into in the wrong segment.
Okay.
Is it can it
Yeah, we
can
can
is
we
this
can we
now
can
the
wait
wrong
until that.
segment?
Yeah.
Okay. So um but I didn't want to besmirch any other authors, so I've decided to besmirch myself.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm not kicking myself, um you know anyway. So after I wrote this and I started to query, I found out some things. I saw, on one, because I got a little bit of interest at the beginning of the process,
Hmm.
from an agent, but after that it was silence. And I read on one agent's website that, sorry, stories set during the Great Depression are not trending. They're not in demand. Nobody wants them.
Sure.
Well, and I'm not sure like how often that particular agent updated that. So, but then the the publishing process takes time. And so
Mhm.
what's trending right now when you've written a story might not be the same
Might
thing
not
as
be
what's
trending.
trending 2 years down the road.
Yeah,
So I'm not sure how you can predict that kind of thing.
you can't.
So yeah, take that with a grain of salt. Um, but then, so I wrote this when I started typing it. I told you I was writing it in my head for a long time.
Mhm.
So it just kind
Yeah,
of started spilling out,
poured out of you.
and it poured out in first person present tense. That's
Okay.
just how the story wanted to be told.
Mhm.
Well, of course, after I finished and started querying, I found a discussion on Twitter, because that's where we learn all kinds of things.
That is where we learn all kinds of things.
I found a discussion on Twitter that indicated that readers, or a lot of people, despise first person present tense.
Yeah.
So, whoops. I mean, I don't know. I love first person present tense. To me, it like puts you right there
Yeah.
in the action. And that's what I hope that people feel when they read this, like they're with June. Like June is right there taking you through everything, and you're just with her.
Mhm.
So, and
So
sorry.
yeah. So when you were sending these chapters out, which very bold of you. I want to underscore to our listeners that was a very brave thing that you do, printing off the chapters and having your sons and husband and mom read the book as you go. What was their initial reaction to the story as it was evolving?
So my husband is brutally honest. So
Hmm.
he made me the most nervous, um because he'll tell me like, well, this doesn't make sense, or he'll just tell me straight up.
Hmm.
And then I'll ask him, well, did you like it, or did this part make you cry? What did you feel? And he's just like, eh. I mean, he's he doesn't show emotion
Hmm.
very much. So you know but I mean, it's not he's not much of a pleasure reader.
Sure.
So my mom seemed to love every bit of it. Like she would be, what, what's going to happen next, or um so but she also has an eagle eye
Hmm.
for things. Like, she would catch little things, so she would help me keep things consistent or fix problems here and there. My sons, my older one was just too cool, really, to
Sure.
read.
You said he was 14.
The older one's 17.
Oh, 17. Yeah.
Of course, at that time he was still 16. So
Oh,
but
I was there.
anyway,
I was a nightmare.
and he has a job, and so he's too busy. The younger one, once I had all the chapters printed out, I put it all into a binder. The younger one let me read it out loud to him. We would read a chapter every night before bed.
Aw.
And that was really good for me, just to hear how everything sounded out loud as I
Hmm.
read. But he seemed to like it.
Yeah.
Like, he earlier on, when I was asking him to read a chapter at a time, like, he seemed to pretend like, oh, that's not my genre.
Yeah.
But when I read it to him out loud, the whole thing, he remembered details of it. I was like,
Hmm.
I thought you didn't read that chapter earlier. So um, he seemed to like it. He said he liked it, even though it's not his genre.
Well, that's high praise from a teenage boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is I yeah, I just when I think about sharing things that I've written, I never want to share it until it's all done.
Yeah.
until I have at least the first draft completed. And I mean, the first draft, I mean, is usually a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. How
You
many?
know, that's the part that's going to be cool though, is because so much in the story has changed since then, since I read that to my son out loud, and
Yeah.
since my mom has seen chapter by chapter, so much has changed.
Hmm.
I think for the better, of course, because it's
Right.
gone through multiple revisions. So
Yeah.
now when it comes out and my mom reads it again, it's going to be like new because it has evolved.
Yeah. That is always the case. The first draft isn't about writing a good story. It's about getting something on the page that you can play with
Yeah.
and make it better. My dad read the first draft of what became Abandon All Hope, and it was a mess. It was awful. And he hadn't read it until it was getting much closer to publication. Like, so he was in the dark, and then we started doing this audiobook where he's our narrator. He's like, wow, this is really good. So it's funny how things evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So is this your first novel?
Well, I mean, that kind of depends. I
Hmm.
did attempt writing a novel many years ago. It's been like 17 years since I wrote that one.
A
And
whole parenthood ago.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I intended to try to get that one published.
Hmm.
And you know, things like now, uh, sorry, like little details I don't remember. I mean, I vaguely remember, you know, doing some research on publishing and stuff, but something happened with that manuscript.
Hmm.
A computer or something ate like the last third of it,
Oh no.
because the next time I opened it up to look at it, because it was, you know, like 70 something thousand words. The next
Hmm.
time I opened it up, it was 40,000. So I lost a big chunk of it. And I just recently opened it back up and
Hmm.
started reading it, and it's complete trash. So, but I think I had to write it at that time
Right.
because it, that was right after my first husband passed away.
Oh, okay.
And it was just kind of therapeutic for me to write
Hmm.
it. And so I think it served its purpose, and I think it's just gonna stay hidden where it
Yeah.
is. But I do have some other things too that I started and just never finished
Hmm.
because of life, or
Oh, you're a mom.
you
You're a
know,
working
yeah.
mom, so having any time to write one book is a feat, right?
Well, I figure, you know, maybe I could do a book a summer, you
Yeah.
know, because summer's really the only time I'm gonna have time to do something like that
Hmm.
now.
So do you have something in the works right now? A second
Sort of,
book?
kinda.
Yeah.
Um, I have I have a rough first chapter of a potential sequel,
Cool.
but I haven't really planned it all out yet. I have ideas, of course, and of course I need to spend a couple months just writing it in my head before I
Right.
can start.
Yeah. Well,
But
you have a couple months. We're recording this in mid-March. So
yeah,
you have a couple months
yeah.
before you would
And
need to. Yeah.
I have a middle grade one that I started writing, which was totally inspired by Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, because
Oh
it's got
yeah.
a little bit of whimsical magic in it.
Hmm.
Um, but that's one that I just never finished.
Sure.
And I'd like to go back to that. The problem is going back to it now, a lot of the technology needs to be brought
Updated.
up to date,
Yeah.
because, you know, it's talking about phone books and, you know,
Hmm.
a phone like with a cord that hooks to the
Yeah.
wall, that kind of stuff. So,
Unless you explicitly said it in 2000 or
yeah,
whenever.
but
It's like that was the case with my dad's novel that's coming out, with City Limits later this year. He wrote it a while ago, and so much technology changed that he just explicitly said it in 2002. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a thought.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So this though, Sitting on Top of the World is your first publication, right?
Yes.
So are you nervous at all for it being released to the world and reviewers and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, kind of,
Yeah.
especially since, you know, teaching middle school language arts, I know that we count on, I mean, I love all the books that we would teach in class, use for instruction. Like we taught A Wrinkle in Time.
Mhm.
Um,
Great book.
some of my favorites, we taught Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. We
Mhm.
taught The Watsons Go to Birmingham, love that one. The Outsiders. And so I I hope and pray that my book may become one that teachers feel the same about. They love to teach it to their
Yeah.
kids.
It definitely
And
sounds like it.
so, but I mean, since I'm in education, I I mean there's going to be a lot of scrutiny
Mhm.
from, just all the education people. And
Right.
so, I have the two districts that I've worked for. A lot of friends in those districts are looking forward to the release. And and of course in my head I'm going, oh my gosh, what if they hate it? What if they read this and they're like, oh my gosh, this is horrible? um so there's that.
Yeah. Well, what advice would you have for somebody who's just starting writing their first book?
um Gosh, do writing contests.
Yeah.
There are so many of them out there, and the one that I have been doing repeatedly, NYC Midnight. There is an entry fee, but you can find other contests that don't have an entry fee. But what I like about the writing contests that I've done with NYC Midnight is that you get your creative juices flowing. I mean, it wasn't until a couple years ago that I started doing that I rediscovered my love of writing. I
Hmm.
mean, I've just been kind of um, buried in everyday life and doing
Right.
work and doing all the stuff that you have to do. And but once I discovered that writing contest and kind of got back into writing, oh my gosh, I just you know a whole new world of happiness just opened up
Yeah.
after so much time of not having been writing. And it's just fun. And then of course if you place highly in any of the competitions, it's a boost, like, oh, so I am kind of good at this,
Hmm.
you know so that do enter writing contests, have a critique group. There's a group, um, I mentioned earlier that
Hmm.
we met on the forums for the NYC Midnight competitions, and a bunch of us broke off, and now we have this group on Discord, and we critique each other's writing, we give each other encouragement, and it's a lot of fun.
That sounds awesome. Cheryl, it's been so great talking to you today. It's been really great to meet you. I'm so excited to see your book released, and I really can't wait for everyone to read it. I hope it becomes a sixth grade language arts classic.
Sixth
Yeah.
or maybe seventh,
Or maybe
maybe
seventh.
between seventh and eighth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
But
Well, you can order your copy of Sitting on Top of the World everywhere books are sold. So you can get it through citylimitspublishing.com, Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, all of those. Those are the big ones. So we will certainly remind you of that when the book releases. Cheryl, thank you so much. Any final thoughts for our listeners? Where can people find you on social media?
Oh, okay. So you can find me on Twitter. I'm Seeking Author.
Mhm.
And on Facebook, I have a page called Cheryl King Writes Things.
Awesome. Love that.
I also have a website, CherylKingWritesThings.com.
That's got such a nice ring to it. Cheryl King writes things. Well,
Yeah.
thank you all for listening. I'm Peter Fenton, and this is Read, Right, and Wrong. What are you still doing listening to this episode? Hit pause, head over to citylimitspublishing.com, and find your next book. I'm your host, Peter Fenton. You can find me online at bypeterfenton.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at peterfent. Have a great day, everyone.